You should be a sponge. Soak it in. Soak it in. Don't worry too much about what's right, what's wrong. All of that will come intuitively. Why move to HR from supply chain? What's wrong with supply chain? Right? You said you don't like supply chain. Why? Why do you want to do FMCG? Just because it's fancy? Why do you want to do consulting? Because you get to wear a suit? That's not what we're looking for. Don't force yourself to become something that you see others do, because honestly 95% of careers are by accident.
So it's a very direct correlation. It's not like, okay, sales and marketing do the tangible work and HR is all faff. It doesn't. Work hard. Because through working hard and giving it that time, you will be able to understand the depth of anything.
Hi everyone. Thanks a lot for being here in Business Formals in Jamshedpur humidity. I can relate. I was here 2 years back sitting on the other side. I welcome you all to the first season of Inside Reckitt's Leadership Conversations 2024. Introducing myself, I am Sarthak. I did my MBA in HR from XLRI and got a chance to intern with Reckitt for my summers. Was fortunate enough to get a PPO and then joined the company last year as a management trainee in HR. Had 3-4 stints around various domains of HR, and now I'm leading early careers in campus hiring for Reckitt. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. We are trying to help you understand how can your career journey look like. Right? Gain as many insights as you can about FMCG in general, about Reckitt, about HR, because you have a golden opportunity to do so. The session, of course, it's named Inside Reckitt's Leadership, and we have an esteemed panel today with us from Reckitt. We have Abhishikta Das, who is the Regional HR Director for South of Asia, and we have Prateek Kumar, who is the Senior HR Manager for Talent, Leadership Development and Culture. So let's give them a huge round of applause, and let's start the session. How was your experience of getting your first job out of the campus? I mean, when you sat for your SIP placements or your final placements, how was it for you? And back in the day, what were the things that you were assessed on when you were taking those interviews?
I love how he's put back in the day very nicely into the question. I did a summer internship at an FMCG major, and what I did, I got a PPO. So that was my initial journey, but the summers and the job were very different, right? So just to give you an example, I interned with a business that was into apparel, into lifestyle retailing, fashion. That is where I interned, and I was in a very fancy office. Everybody had, back in 2014, curved Mac screens to work on, and so on and so forth, right? So really fancy. The internship was fairly straightforward. It was about how do they recruit better, how do they train better. I think I got a fairly relatively easy final review, which I was able to come through. So if I look back at the thoroughness of the work that I did, I would sort of want to do better. But so that was summers, and then second year was a breeze. So first semester as say among the top 3 in the batch, second semester again in the top 3, then I got the PPO, I was ranked 10, and in the final semester I was ranked 27. And then I did my second year, and then I went in for a corporate induction. At the end of the corporate induction, I got my posting letter, and I was sent to a small town called Mysore in a factory where I was 25, and the next youngest person in the factory was 35, and my leader of the union was 75. So when you'd negotiate across a table, then the gentleman would say that, when you were born, I was negotiating my 35th settlement or the 40th settlement, right? So that's how the first job was. But all in all, somebody gave me advice, and I don't want to be sounding preachy, but if there's something you want to be, you should be a sponge. And I'm not saying SpongeBob, but you should be a sponge. Soak it in. Soak it in. Don't worry too much about what's right, what's wrong. All of that will come intuitively. Or your sense of right and wrong, like Sarthak talked about, your the compass, and at Reckitt we have our own compass which guides our behaviors and our decisions. You will have your own compass that will tell you what is right, what is wrong. And your right and wrong will be very different from what others perceive as right and wrong, right?
What's the first thing you look for in a candidate when you are assessing them, let's say in a personal interview?
Okay, that's a tough one because that's leaking the question paper. So I think especially when it comes to looking at candidates in summers, there isn't a lot of HR knowledge that you've been able to gain because you've not, even if you've attended lectures and sessions and classrooms, management is an inductive science, right? So theory reinforces practice and practice adds back to theory. So you've not had too much practice. So I never really go into what is section 2S of the Industrial Disputes Act, what is the definition of a workman, or what is the Herzberg's two-factor theory line by line. I don't really go into that. What I really look at is purpose, right? What has brought you to Excel, or what has brought you to TIS? What decisions have you taken and why? I'm not judging the decisions, but I want to know why you've taken certain decisions. I want to know, if, for example, if I were to look back at my CV in summers, a question I would ask myself is why move to HR from supply chain? What's wrong with supply chain? Right? You said you don't like supply chain, why? Right? Or what are your experiences that led you to decide it is not the right career for me? So I think I look at a sense of purpose. I also look at passion, energy, wanting to give something to the organization you want to intern for. Because and when summers will happen, it's going to be crazy. I've been here representing another company in the summers process, and you really don't know which room to which room to which room you're moving, right? It's a tough day. It's an exacting day. It's a day where all of you will go through a multitude of emotions. To keep your clarity intact in terms of which organization, why do you want to do FMCG? Just because it's fancy? Why do you want to do consulting? Because you get to wear a suit? That's not what we're looking for, right? If you're in an interview with an FMCG major, be sure about why you want to be there. Be sure about the ad films that have inspired you as a kid, the products you love using, the products you fight at home to get replaced, right? The products you go to an outlet and say, ye nahi hai, so I will not come to your store. I want this regularly. That is what some people in FMCG have. Consulting, problem solving, right from solving puzzles as a kid to figuring out what makes organizations tick. So that sense of purpose, passion, energy, and clarity about what you want to do. Nobody really is going to check about the HR knowledge you have. It's too new, too less, and can be easily mucked up, right?
How do you get the clarity of the specialization you want to choose? I mean, in your case, you went to TIS, where HR is the only course that's available, and similarly for Excel, where HR is the most flagship course that they have on campus. So how do you actually decide, especially when you are a fresher out of your undergrad, how do you decide the specialization that, okay, HR is what I want to do, or finance or marketing is what I want to do?
You will have a hunch on what you should be doing. You will. If you just step back, you will always have a hunch of what you should be doing. But guess what? You may get into it and realize a couple of years out that that's not your calling, in fact. And that's also fine. That's also fine. You're at a stage in life where you have enough time to experiment. And it's okay to get, to take a detour and go into something and say, you know what, okay, I'm richer for it, I learned something from it, and now let me take another detour. So it's all fine in the end of it, okay? So there's no right or wrong. You make the best decision that you think is the best for you at that point in time, but the goalpost keeps moving.
Okay, so I think one thing that you all can derive from Abhishikta's answer, and maybe us as well, that you don't need to have the entire journey figured out, right? What you need to have figured out is the next step that you want to take. And more often than not, that will, at some point later in life, that will tell you whether that was the right decision or not. And even if it wasn't, you'll have that experience, so you would know that there won't be any regrets. So the idea is to always keep moving forward and have this one step chalked out for yourself. Whether it's the SIPs, when the SIPs are done, the second trimester, the third trimester, many people would, talking about B school, contest for secretary positions. Many people would want to go for their exchanges. So every one step is what you need to, get figured out. What does the career path look like for someone who is, graduating fresh out of a tier 1 MBA college and striving to make a career in HR? So like, what is the usual career path, and does it become more lucrative when you, grow up the ladder, let's say 10 years from the year you pass out? How does it pan out?
A career usually sort of should be something that keeps you open and flexible to experimentation, right? Because you don't really know right now what you like. I mean, if I were to ask how many of you would want a career in compensation, you would have, say, 10% raising your hand. How many would want a career in talent management? Another random 20% would raise their hands, or vice versa. So you don't really have experiences that shape your choices right now. Your first 4 to 5 years should all be about experiences. It should all be about figuring out what are you good at, what are you not. So all the roles that I've done have all been about diversity of experiences, figuring out what I like. And what, maybe that's told me a couple of things that I don't like. But it's also told me that choices can change. Your learning curve will determine how you decide and how you move ahead, right? And it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to be confused, it's okay to like one thing and then next day say, I do not like it. It's fine, because it really depends on the stage you're at, what excites you, what brings you to work, what adds a spring in your step. I know this sounds preachy, but as you move ahead, you'll realize, because the moment you decide, somebody will give you, start off as a generalist, then do specialism, then come back to being a generalist and become an HR head by the age of 35, 40. That's not how life works, right? Life will throw challenges. Suddenly you'll realize that your work has taken absolute back precedence in your life because your personal life expands to fill a certain space, right? At that point of time, it really doesn't matter what you're doing because you have bigger priorities. So don't make it all about being successful in every stint, or deciding really early if you want to be a rewards professional, or really early if you want to be an IR professional. Take your time, right? Because you are being equipped in every single part of the arsenal, right? Don't force yourself to become something that you see others do, because honestly, 95% of careers are by accident. They're not by choice, they're not by design. Right?
How imperative does HR become when it comes to business decisions? Because, in companies like Reckitt and FMCGs, sales and marketing are the functions which are, called the so-called P&L drivers of the organization. So, when those important decisions are being taken, HR obviously has its seat on that table. So how much, contribution does HR hold in those important decisions being taken?
Everything which is sales and marketing is people, right? So if you look at all the lines of the P&L, let's start with the most obvious ones. What's the top line? The net revenue, right? Now, that is basically sales, and sales is an outcome of obviously your go-to-market structure and everything to do with the distributors, but it is also to do with how you're incentivizing your people to go out there and sell better, right? And HR has a big role to play in that. The second thing is all hiring is directly connected to the turnover of the company. You're getting in the people that are going to be in all those functions. That's the obvious one, right? But we have a metric called the turnaround time, or the time to fill. So for example, if your roles are not filled for 50 days, there's a direct loss of business. And if the role is filled with the incorrect person, there's a direct loss of business. So you can imagine that it is all linked to the P&L. Now if you go to the bottom line, right? So before that, everything, what we call the non-variable overheads, right? Which comprises all your people costs, all your infra costs, all your capability building costs, right? Culture building costs, everything HR is responsible for. So, except for COGS, right, and what we call BI, which is basically your marketing spends, the top line HR impacts and the bottom line HR impacts. So it's a very direct correlation. It's not like, okay, sales and marketing do the tangible work and HR is all faff. It doesn't. So if you go line by line, you will be able to see a direct correlation to every line in the P&L.
HR does play a very important role in terms of making the organization fit for purpose. What should be the right number of people? How many people do you need to be staffing a certain position? Are you overstaffed, understaffed, over-indexed, under-indexed? In making sure the right number of people are producing the right number of boxes and cartons of soap in the right number of factories, right? You can obviously produce infinite amount of stuff with infinite raw materials and infinite people, but that won't give you the optimal output. So optimizing, manning on a line, how many people do you need to cover for a shift? How do you plan for absenteeism? Making sure that your shift schedules in a factory are aligned in such a way that you don't have production losses at the time of Diwali, right? Or at the time of Holi, or at the time of New Year, because that's when people go on leave. But that's also when your consumer demand spikes. That directly impacts bottom line, because your cost of manufacturing is something that HR helps optimize, makes it a source of competitive advantage for organizations, right? So yeah, there is enough to contribute across every segment of the P&L.
So what would you define Reckitt culture as? I mean, what are the values that resonate with us, and why and when should someone choose Reckitt to work with?
What Reckitt will give you is the experience of 5 years in 18 months. Because it's a fast-paced organization. It expects you to keep up. But it's also not an organization that will sort of not help you if you trip, right? But it expects you to keep up. It expects you to be a part of, for example, we had the interns here, we had, and then after the first or the second day, everybody knows the interns are there, they're working on projects, they will walk into people's rooms, get their things done, and move ahead. Because some advice I remember giving a couple of them was that for you, time is money, because you're there only for 2 months. And what you accomplish in those 2 months is going to shape up your experience of Reckitt. So again, if you trace your journeys of people on LinkedIn, the fairly updated, most of Reckitt people are active on LinkedIn. And if you were to look at that, you'd see that most people do our roles for a period of 18 to 24 months. And in that 18 to 24 months, they go through 3 parts of the role, which is learn, perform, outperform, and then move out, right? So if you're looking for the experience of 5 years in 18 months, I think Reckitt's the place to be. I've not been here for very long. I'm sort of in here for 8-9 months. And trust me, the way I've felt my capabilities stretch like a rubber band, it brings me to work every day. So just to give you an example, and I'll add on and build on to what Abhishikta said. Yesterday I walked into a cabin and I told her we are traveling together, and she looked at me with excitement and said yes, and we have a couple of things to discuss on the way. So that gives you the joy that yes, you are co-creating, you are in it as a team. Time matters. Any conversation that you come in needs to have something fruitful, and sometimes that does put pressure on you, but that pressure is positive pressure. It's good pressure. It's Reckitt talent, and a lot of people from Reckitt move across roles in various companies. Again, you can look it up. You guys are well connected. Reckitt talent is talent in demand, and will continue to be talent in demand, because the way we build our leaders, the way we shape our leaders, it's not very theory driven. It's driven by practice. But you need to be very clear about what you want to do. You need to do the right things always. And if you're looking at running a sprint, then yeah, Reckitt's a good place to be. But it's a marathon made of multiple sprints, is how I would put it.
One very important part of our culture, you know, besides, you'll hear these couple of things very often, is about, you know, doing the right thing always around ethics. And the second one is it being very fast-paced and high ownership. The third aspect we're very actively building, and we're all very excited about it. We have, you know, huge commitment from ourselves, the leadership around it, is the aspect of inclusion. And by inclusion, we mean right from how our leaders are listening in, you know, constantly knowing the pulse of the organization, to having real diversity in all senses. And I'm not necessarily referring to any one community. It is diversity in all senses, and slowly building that up in the organization. And that's going forward, that's going to be a very, very important part of our culture.
I think the answers that Prateek and Abhishikta gave kind of resonates with me as well, because the sheer amount of faith that is entrusted in you when you join Reckitt in very early stages of your career, it's just commendable, right? So if you're someone who likes to work with a lot of intent, you want to have whole soul ownership of the work that you're doing, with a lot of accountability and authority as well, then I think Reckitt is the place for you to be. Yeah? Great. So I've been throwing a lot of questions to both of you, so I'll just end the session with one last question. So what would be the last piece of advice that you would want to leave the students with? What would be your 2 cents for them? Because you've been through this journey, you've seen the B school journey, you've seen the placements and everything. So what would your advice be?
So, you know, imagine that you've gone on a vacation for 7 days, right? You've had great fun. You've done scuba, you've you know, explored castles and seen wildlife and shopped a lot. And then on the last day, when you're heading back, you lose your passport, right? You've had a great experience. That experience has been marred by what is a bad memory, right? So learn to separate experience from memory. And it's not easy, because that vacation in your mind will always be a terrible one, because you lost your passport on the last day, right? So my advice to you is separate experience and memory. Live the experiences. I wish I could go back to B school every day. I wish I could go back to B school every time I have a tough moment, right? And you know, if somebody were to ask me what is one thing you wish you hadn't done at TIS, I would have said that maybe I wouldn't have joined the PlaceCom and spent more time with people in the city, getting to know. But it's a fundamental part of who I am now, right? So live those experiences. Don't worry too much about the memories, because there will be good memories, there will be bad ones. But live out your experiences. And whether it is in summers, it doesn't. Obviously, all of us want that PPO, right? All of us want our second year to be relaxed, because we know we have an offer in hand. But if you don't get a PPO, does that mean you did not learn anything in the summers? Don't link it to that, right? That's what I mean by experience and memory, and how I want to translate it to what you will go through.
You see 2 people here nearly 20 years out and 10 years out who've made it, you know, reasonably well in their career after all the ups and downs. So nothing is the end of the world. You will make it. You will make it very well and very strong in a field that you like. There are enough opportunities. You are lucky to be a part of, you know, this generation that has so many opportunities. So life will figure itself out, is what I want to say. And use obviously the 2 years. You will use the 2 years and really enjoying yourself and having a great time. I'm sure most of you will, and I hope you do. But I also want to say, and I think they're going to throw something at me, is work hard. You know, is work hard. I know you've already worked hard to come here, but continue to work hard. Because through working hard and giving it that time, you will be able to understand the depth of anything, and you will enjoy it. So work hard so that you can enjoy it fully, is what I would say. Okay?
I'll just add, we keep hearing, no, 10th कर लो फिर life set है, 12th कर लो फिर life set है, graduation कर लो फिर life set है, MBA कर लो फिर life set है, नौकरी लग गई फिर life set है, life कभी set नहीं. That's a myth and a lie that our parents sell us right from the moment we are born.
And then we tell that lie to ourselves after a point of time. Great. So Abhishikta and Prateek, thank you so much for doing this. Before we wrap up, let's have a final round of questions. If there are any questions that you want to ask the panel.
Hi. So my question is, you guys talked a little bit about the culture as at Reckitt. So I wanted to understand what goes behind as HR leaders to create that sort of culture. And also because it's not a one-time process, right? It's an iterative, everyday process. How do you manage that in a daily basis?
So I think it's there's a phrase, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we've heard that, and we've heard that enough number of times. I think every organization has its very distinct culture. Reckitt's culture stems from excellence and dreaming of a healthier world and so on and so forth. So there is, because we want our products to be helping in building a cleaner, healthier world, there is the aspect of integrity that comes in. We want to be tackling the world's problems as fast as we can. That is where agility comes in. So a lot of it emerges from what we do, and you don't really set out to do culture building. Today I am going to build culture. It doesn't work like that. It's all, like you said, it's iterative, it's incremental, small wins sort of go a long way, because on culture, the organization is mostly aligned. If there is a culture that exists, nobody's going to say it's the wrong thing to do to build it or strengthen it. But there is somebody who has to take that step. So I take that step, I align leadership, I'll go to Abhishikta or to Gaurav, who's our EVP for South Asia, saying how can we build. We'll go to them, we can say that, how do we strengthen certain aspects of our culture? How do we, there are certain values that we have stated, how do we espouse those values within the workplace? Right? And then we work on various small to large level interventions.
Just building off of what Prateek said, especially in HR, it needs a bunch of people that are extremely passionate about driving it as the starting point, because of course there's a DNA that flows through the organization, but who's making it a part of like, oh my god, you enter the office or you meet someone and this is Reckitt, right? So there's a lot that goes into it. So it needs a bunch of people that are willing to keep this up as a top agenda every single day. Of course, everyone wants to jump in. Everyone is keen to do it, but sometimes they don't know how to do it. Sometimes business priorities take up. So who's that bunch that keeps it front and center? And then you have to have a very thought out plan. And there are answers, for example, even in the inclusion space that we don't understand and we're seeking to understand. So we're also building the roadmap as we go along. But what we know is there's an absolute passion, there's a desire, and there's an intent. And of course, answers will come as we go along, right? So that bunch, I think, is very, very core.
Hi. So you both said that it's okay to not have everything figured out. But then why is... what is your what is your long-term goal, short-term goal? What is your, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why is that the first question that HRs ask?
Actually, that's not the question that only HR asks. If you really look at it, that's the question everyone will ask, right? Your parents will ask, your friends will ask, you will exchange notes with your friends. And the way I would put it, I would actually step back from what I said and rephrase it. It's okay to have a plan, but don't get attached to it so much that you feel completely broken if that plan doesn't work out. Because when you were making the plan, you didn't know all the variables. And it may happen that what you actually land up in hindsight, would be like, wow, okay, this is why it happened, and now it all makes sense. So if someone's asking you that and you have a plan, go ahead and say it, right? And you should have that much, right? And there is a possibility that you may actually stay the course and achieve it. And there are people who do that as well, right? And I think that is a basic human tendency to close the loop in our own mind, right? कि आगे जाके आप क्या करोगे, कहाँ जाना चाहते हो, which line of occupation do you want. Everyone wants to close that loop in their own minds. That's why that question.
Great. So that brings us to the end of this Q&A. Thank you so much, Prateek, Abhishikta, for doing this.